This is the first time I've spoken on this issue, but it's one of these issues of such importance nationally and internationally that it would be remiss of me if I didn't spend some time dealing with this situation that prevails in Ireland today. I'm slightly older than the previous speaker, who's covered most of the points in great depth, but in Ireland in the 80s, women were often so terrified of having their babies by not trusting the maternity hospitals with, quote, a Catholic ethos, that many preferred to travel to, quote, the Rotunda Hospital in Dublin because of its, quote, Protestant ethos. They felt more reassured that if in a crisis situation, they would get better life-saving response and treatment. That was in the 80s. It was a widely held view by those of us who never, knew that there was a very distinctive difference in ethos between both the Catholic maternity hospitals and the Rotunda Hospital in Dublin. Imagine that women would have to travel to Belfast in those days to have amniotic synthesis tests because of their unavailability in the Republic. Now, that was 30 years ago, and one would have imagined that our maternity hospitals would not have progressed to a point that the life of Savita Halappanavar would have been saved. And nobody could have cited as an excuse that this is a Catholic country. That was the Ireland, Laskincola, that my children were born in. One of them's 32 years of age and the other's 30. And here we have this debate, yet again, inconclusive as it is, still ongoing, for which we need a finality. The hypocrisy, Laskincola, and indignity of forcing women from this country, including a 14-year-old suicidal rape victim, to travel to England for a termination is, I believe, an obscenity and a blot on the image of Ireland nationally and internationally. While Ireland is indeed an overwhelmingly Catholic nation, the survey just completed, the census shows that are 84% of the Irish people in the Republic proclaiming themselves as Catholic. We must also note that we are now a very diverse society more than ever before. We as legislators must legislate for a nation as a whole and not just for the religious moral teachings of one faith. We are, quote, a multi-faith society now, and we must legislate for such a society. I think it would be no harm to read into the records of what is Ireland today in 2012. And you might note that the nearest in numbers to Catholics are those who declared themselves as having, quote, no religion. They now number 269,000, almost 270,000 people, which is an increase of 44.8% over the 2006 census figure. In fact, a further 73,000 do not state a religion, which would be indicative of a open-minded collective. Among those who did declare themselves last year, the next largest grouping to those with no religion are members of the Church of Ireland, who now constitute 130,000 people. The Presbyterian numbers are up by 4.5% to 24,600. Jehovah's Witnesses stand at about 6,000 plus. But far and away the most significant non-Christian religion in Ireland today is Islam. And the members of the Irish Muslim community now represent about 50,000 people, which is a big increase of 52% over the figures in 2006. And the numbers of Hindus, and Hindus are important in this debate too, with a backdrop of Savita, who was Hindu, has grown by 75, nearly 76% to about 11,000. And then there's Buddhists, and then there's a Jewish population, and there's other groups. The point Leskin Corley is that while I respect absolutely the right of the 5 bishops and his congregation to pick at the doll here, what I've got to say is that we are not, as legislators, to attempt to legislate for one faith or the morals of one religious grouping. We must legislate for an open, diverse, multicultural society. And for those who practice Roman Catholicism, I've got to remind them that no Catholic who has this moral belief need avail of such services that may be available to those who do not believe that life commences at the moment of fertilization, which is the Roman Catholic Church position. But I believe very strongly that in a modern liberal democracy, we as legislators must not impose in laws the singular views of one faith group. You know, I'm not going to spend too much time in going over the details of what has happened in the past in Ireland, but as Deputy O'Riordan has mentioned some of them, and as I've had a quick perusal of the report of the expert group, it strikes me that there's one missing group that don't seem to matter in this country, least of which is the women whose lives are threatened. And that is the women's family, their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, their brothers, their partners, brothers and family, the extended family, who are excluded in the main from these debates. And when I'm looking at these cases that were brought to the European Court of Justice, are the ones that took Ireland, there's a case called the D case. And this is where a poor unfortunate woman had discovered after 14 weeks of pregnancy that one of the twins she was carrying had died in the womb after 14 weeks, and that the other had lethal fetal abnormality, a thing called Edwards syndrome. Now I ask in all humanity, or humility, what are the religious groupings and the pro-life groupings arguing that this woman should be compelled to continue her pregnancy when she, her family, her husband, her partner, her mother, her father, her aunts and her uncles and her grandmothers might very well have decided with her agreement to abort? You go on and you read a further case. Miss D brought a case against the Health Service Executive. Miss D was 4 months pregnant at the time of the hearing when she had learned that the fetus had anencephalia. I won't pronounce that word. It's a neural tube defect resulting in the absence of a major portion of the brain, which is usually fatal within 3 days of birth. You know, I just wonder how insensitive this society has been to mothers, to families, to husbands, to children, that we have not over that last 20 years improved the circumstances where a woman can go into a maternity hospital and feel absolutely secure that if she and her family make a decision that a fetus is dead in the womb, that we must continue with a pregnancy. I think that's an obscenity, and I think we as legislators better pull our finger out and start legislating for women, their partners, their husbands, their wives as a collective, and remind the 5 bishops who amazingly had this excited audience of pro-life members who were so hysterical in their extreme views that they were the mirror image of those who demonstrated 2 days earlier who were looking for abortion on demand. And it makes me wonder, these 2 extremes, screeching, absolutely hysterical, both of them were mind-bogglingly not in this world. One group led by 5 Roman Catholic bishops, and the others led by ultra-leftist Trotskyists and Ira Gee and certain former feminists. And I think while they constitute the extremes, we have a mandate as Democrats in a liberal democracy to make sure that we don't interpret their views, but we accept that we have the maturity of a parliament to implement legislation for the betterment of humanity, Irish women or any mother who has to use the service of our maternity services. Thank you very much.